Welcome to the 10-Minute Life Coaching Program. My name is Jay Cleveland Payne. I train people for improved personal and professional development, offering my assistance for those ready to develop their goals into tangible, focused, and achievable plans of action. And this podcast is one tool I use to complete my mission. How it works: in 10 minutes time, when the 10-minute mark hits on this podcast, you'll have a life lesson that you can take away with you at this point right here and apply it to something going on in your life immediately. And if this lesson in this episode sounds familiar, like something you're already trying to do that just doesn't know how to work itself out, maybe I can help. Go to our website, 10minutelifecoach.com, and see if there's a way that we can connect so that we can help work on this together. This podcast is powered by the $10 Life Coaching Program. More on that project in just a moment, but first, today's lesson. When I began the 10-Minute Life Coach program, I began it with a big mission in mind. I wanted to actually make this thing make a little money and become something that could grow. And I got this idea from listening to earlier on podcasts, and I know that's not quite grammatically correct, but two podcasters that were doing a podcast and then going into coaching and masterminding and things like that back in 2011. Now, podcasting was still fairly new and fairly wide open at the time. And these guys were some of the people at the top of the charts. This is well before podcasts became a mainstream type thing. And a lot of the big time people got into podcasting, at least turning in their materials into podcasts and reaching out directly. And some of the folks that are now big now weren't even in the business at the time. This was, like I said, back in 2011 when this podcast was born, well before our very long hiatus, because it was a lot harder to keep up than I thought it would be. But here is the real reason behind the birth of the 10-Minute Life Coach. I was listening to a couple other life coach guys in the process. They were doing their life coach thing. They were charging people for extra access for other things. They were doing coaching and everything. And I had, in my mind, just as much license to coach other people as they did. In fact, one of the guys who seemed to be doing very well also seemed to be kind of scammy in this process. Another guy was kind of an entertainer person that had enough entertainment value that brought people in there. Since I was working in radio and learning about podcasting to use it for my other radio ventures, it was a perfect fit. I had read and basically it just inhaled so much personal development at that time. I essentially been studying personal development and leadership since high school, middle school. This was something that really meant something to me. I was practicing these things and seeing how they worked with me and with other people that I was training at the time. So I did what anybody else would do. I called myself an expert. I started the podcast and came up with the tagline. And of course, the thing to make me different was I would do all my housekeeping after the lesson. The other shows were about 10 minutes or so, but they were taking up 4 or 5 minutes of junk, 4 or 5 minutes of housekeeping and hype, and then about 5 minutes of some short lesson. My thing was offer up a 10-minute lesson right off the bat. So within 60 seconds of an intro, you're getting a lesson. And as you know, if you actually count the times in how we work this since we took out the intro the first time and brought it back, it's still the same way. After 1 minute, I start the message. At 10 minutes, the message is basically done. So you get a actually 9-minute life lesson, if you will. From there, I put in the extra stuff into the old version that had the housekeeping, the sales pitch, all that great stuff. And so it was about a 25-minute podcast that had a 10-minute lesson. That was the deal. From there, you can sign up for the $10 Life Coach, which at the time was 4 or 5 different podcasts of the week. Actually, it was 5 total. Well, you count the $10 Life Coach, which was free, you got access to 3 other days of lessons. And at the end of the week, we had to keep it real time, to show people that things were going in real time. We had a lesson that was based off a news story. Somebody would do something kind of dumb in the news, and then we would use that as the life lesson or life lesson for the week. I also had some newsletters and some conference calls at the time to make everything work out. So you got the whole thing. It wasn't the coaching, the community groups that we do these days. It was literally you got extra access to extra materials, which is how the other ones worked as well. You got a Monday one for free in those two, and then you got the rest of the week plus some Saturday, Sunday stuff, special things if you paid the subscription cost. And that's how I built this up. The problem was it was a very hard road to hoe, if you will. And I couldn't quite get a full year in because of changes in my life. So you'll hear that in the real quick explanation in episode 44. If you go back that far, where we're back, and it explains coming back and getting back in the swing of things. Trying to go the full year, full 52 episodes became a bit of an effort, and that happened. Now we brought it back, and we're back to a newer version where we've added in the audio elements and some other things. And that's a way to evolve the podcast with technology evolving and, to be honest, interest evolving and making sure it sounds clearer, more awesome-er, also not grammatically correct, for people who are getting into the thing that don't know the basics part of what's going on. But it still comes down to a basic part. The 10-minute life coach is meant to be 10 minutes to mean when the explanation of the whole podcast and my whole approach is, I'm going to give you the lesson right now, and in 10 minutes, you can take it along with you. Now, granted, some of these lessons are done in about 5 minutes. Some of these things that I actually go through, and some things that really frustrates me when I do coach people, is that the concept is pretty simple. If you're doing something that doesn't work and you realize it doesn't work, you stop doing it and then figure out what comes better from that action or inaction, if you will, based on what you're doing or not doing. So if it's that simple, how come people can't get it right and people have to look for life coaching and counseling in other places? Well, because we're humans and because it's not that simple. Us being humans, we find ways to mess things up that are very simple because that's what humans do. And it's not that simple. Sometimes the change, the fix, isn't as obvious as other people can see because we're stuck in it. If you are driving a car and someone else is watching the map, they can see the things that are coming up miles and miles away because they're looking at it on the map. You can only see what's exactly in front of you a few feet to a few hundred feet based on the visibility of how you're driving. So the coaching part is an excellent part to what's going on. Someone else on the outside seeing things going on and guiding you towards your way or letting you know things that might be ahead to look for. But it shouldn't take that much effort to go forward. At least, like I said, it shouldn't take that. But sometimes it takes more effort than you expect. And that's why I made this work out the way it did. Making it go any longer made no sense because there are a lot of programs out there that go into long, incredibly boring missives and storytelling and insights that don't really tell good stories and aren't really good insights, but they're essentially running for time. They're trying to make it as big and bulbous and long as they can because they want to get more listens for the podcast. It means something to them. They mean a longer podcast to fill things. I have other podcasts that are specifically meant to be longer that do need bits and pieces to fill things to make sure they get that linked every week. But sometimes they get shrunk because I have too many things, and that's just the key nature of the business. This one doesn't happen very often. The lesson is usually a fairly simple and simplistic lesson, if you will, because I am giving it for free, so I don't want to give anything that's going to be really complicated and take too long to get into. But thrown into the mix are extra stories and extra speeches and extra things going in to make sure it stretches the full 10 minutes for the lesson because we want to make sure you get your money's worth. If that's what you're looking for, making it your money's worth for a free podcast. So this is not a really grand explanation of the origins of the 10-minute podcast, but it goes to show what the actual lesson of the day is. Your lesson isn't necessarily as complicated as you make it. Sometimes the information you need to do to figure things out are really quick to figure out and make and do. So if you can, figure it out, make it do, don't stretch it out. If you find you're not figuring things out as best as possible, then look into why that's not happening and go through the motions that need to be taken care of to figure it out and fix it. But sometimes the simplest message is the simplest message. And sometimes the simplest message is exactly all you need to know. If something isn't working, stop doing it. If hitting your head against the wall hurts, you don't want your head to hurt, stop hitting your head against the wall. If your hand is in a pot of boiling water, removing that will ease the pain of having your hand in a pot of boiling water. Don't get psyched out by the fact that the fix is simple, the lesson is quick, and the thing seems like it's easy. Give it a shot, see if it works, and maybe you got off easy this time. or maybe you need a deeper lesson. But you have to just take the simple lesson and go with that. Once again, thank you so much for listening to the 10-Minute Life Coach today. We appreciate every single listener, every single download, every single person who shares this with other like-minded people. And we want to make sure you're getting your money's worth, even though, it is a free podcast. But we want to make sure that the information we give you is important, is vital, is actually good information. It's not worth my time or your time to do it if it's not any good. We also want to make sure you find the help you need if you're looking for just a slight tad bit of extra assistance to help things go a little smoother. And we do that with the $10 Life Coach, which powers this program. And the $10 Life Coach is a pretty simple idea. It's just like-minded people like you, like me, who are in this thing together so much that we're joining together to help each other out. We have meetings online, virtual meetings, and we share information back and forth about how we're doing, and we join together to lift each other up. If you just need a little bit of something to help you figure out if your ideas are working or why something in your life isn't shifting like it should, or why something is going so great and you feel like you just need to share it with other people to see why it is and try to get some confirmation on it, you can join us in the $10 Life Coach. And $10 a month is what it takes to essentially keep the lights on in the building, buy some snacks, do things like that. Find information about that by sending me a quick email to $10lifecoach@gmail.com. Information on this podcast and all things 10-Minute Life Coach at the main website, 10minutelifecoach.com. Send me emails here to 10minutelifecoach@gmail.com. And anything to me off topic, if you will, can go to info@jclevelandpayne.net. With that, we're done for the day. Thank you so much for being a part of the podcast. You can find it on pretty much any single podcatcher or service that you're looking for. We're still working on Spotify. They're a little iffy on how they make things work on, but we're trying to get every place you think you could have us at. We're on iTunes, of course, or Apple Podcasts. We're on iHeartRadio. We're on Stitcher. We're on Spreaker. We're on Blueberry. We're pretty much anywhere you want to be, except for Spotify, working on that. Share it with some friends and like-minded people. And, of course, be here next week for another edition of the 10-Minute Life Coach.